The Secrets of Star Wars is brought to you by the StarQuest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give.
I am Emily Swallow, also known as the Armorer on The Mandalorian. And I'm just giving a little shout out to the Secrets of Star Wars podcast because this is the way.
Hello there.
It's a power that Jedi have that lets them control people and make things float.
Impressive. Every word in that sentence was wrong.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
This station is now the ultimate power in the universe.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
It's against my programming to impersonate a deity.
That's not how the Force works.
Force is with me, and I am with the Force, and I fear nothing.
Remember, the Force will be with you, always.
You're listening to The Secrets of Star Wars, where we talk about everything connected to that galaxy far, far away. From movies to books, TV shows, and more, we're looking at the deeper themes and meanings found in the Star Wars universe. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Wars on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app, or on the StarQuest YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. On X, we are at SQPN, or on Instagram, where we are at StarQuest Network. And be sure to get your official Secrets of Star Wars gear at SQPN.com/merch. I'm your host, Patrick Mason, and joining me today on the panel is Jeff Haecker. Hey, Jeff. And joining us after a hiatus, Jason Eugea. Welcome back, Jason.
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. Today we are discussing Andor, Season 2, Episode 10, Make It Stop. Jeff, you want to run us through the summary?
It is 1 BBY. Lonnie meets with Luthen, sharing that Dedra is putting an operation together on Coruscant, thinking it is to take down Luthen. He has access to Dedra's files, and he has learned about a superweapon. In exchange for this information, he wants Luthen to get his family to safety. However, Luthen kills Lonnie to tie up the loose end, and he sends Kleya to the safe house, while he goes to destroy the communications equipment in his art gallery. Dedra has traced access to Luthen, who tries to end his own life before falling into enemy hands, but he's taken to the hospital. In flashbacks, it is revealed that Luthen was part of the military who had attacked Kleya's home planet, but Luthen hides her and brings her up as an apprentice. In the present, Dedra is arrested for not reporting that she received files meant for Director Krennic, and Kleya infiltrates the hospital to remove Luthen from life support, and succeeding, cries over her mentor. The end.
All right. The end, yeah. But not quite. So
it's for Luthen, though.
Yeah, all right. So, Jeff, what were your impressions of this episode?
Yeah, so shockingly, I love this episode. Like I've loved almost every episode of this season and really of this entire series, but I was really happy we finally got some of the backstory of Luthen, and I really hope we get more books and things to fill in some of the gaps, because I'm still very interested how, because we meet Luthen in the flashback for the first time, and he's seems like he's a communications guy on a ship, and I don't know if it's entirely clear, but it seems like he's part of the Empire's military or something along those lines, attacking this planet. And he's drinking, and like the horrors of war are getting to him. And, he finds Kleya hiding in the ship, presumably her entire family being killed. And instead of, carrying out this genocide or whatever you want to call it, he saves her and, starts to bring her up as I don't want to say her father. I mean, kind of a father figure, but almost more of an apprentice, because he even references when it's the young Kleya that, we can pretend you're my daughter if we need to. So, like, I think he just has a twisted view. So, I mean, I think as best he can, he considers her a daughter, but I think we would probably see it more as like a master apprentice type of relationship. So I really like that. And, I felt really bad for Lonnie. Like I was hoping, you knew something like this was probably going to happen to him. I hope his family got to safety somehow. But so he's gone, and then Dedra's arrested. So, yeah, a lot of setup here, and then Kleya's all alone on Coruscant after taking out Luthen. So yeah, great episode, and excited to discuss more.
What about you, Jason?
I was on the edge of my seat the entire time. I know we'll get into it at some point, but I had to pause the show and tell my wife a theory I had. Turns out it was wrong, but I was convinced during that episode, and edge of my seat the whole time. Just, it was almost sort of, they came out on those Tuesday nights, all 3 episodes. And I watched all 3 at the same time. And that episode 10 had me on the edge of my seat for those other 2 episodes as well. And I was just, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. It was the best episode by far for me.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, this is one of those episodes that I think goes along with the other 2 so seamlessly that you really just want to watch it like a movie. Like you just want to keep watching the 3 episodes. I finally love that we get the backstory between who Luthen is, from a certain point of view, and who Kleya is, because who they are in their relationship has been such a big question mark for the entirety of the show that I'm glad we got answers to it, and I'm glad we sort of saw their progression. It very much was everything coming together, being put together in a nice, neat, tight little package before we get to, Andor season 3, and which is what I've been calling Rogue One, and then eventually when we get to A New Hope, and we're we're 1 BBY, right? We get the 3 bongs, and then we're so close to the Battle of Yavin at this point. So
it's like December 27th, 1 BBY, and we're about to turn to 0 BBY because we're right before Rogue One and New Hope.
Yeah, well, if I think they measure it just like the BCAD. There is no 0, so
right.
That's why they call it 1 BBY, because right at the end of that year is the battle for Yavin, and then it's 1 ABY.
Yeah, it's like Krennic says, we're days away, just a few more tests.
Yeah.
This, unlike a lot of the shows, this was not as split up, I think. I mean, it kind of was. You had sort of the interplay of like the now and the past played out together, so we'll probably split those on. But the way the show starts is the emergency signal that we get. So what do you guys, what did you like? What did you dislike about the sort of setup for how all the dominoes are going to kind of fall into place here?
I mean, I really liked it. I thought it was great that they had a signal. I love the spycraft in this show, of seeing like how they communicate messages, and we get to see like toward the end Luthen burning the equipment that they've been using, and in further episodes we'll kind of get more on like how they used it. But I love kind of the spycraft of it. And yeah, like I said, poor Lonnie, like you knew probably from the first episode he shows up where Luthen's telling him like you're too important and you just had a daughter. Like probably no, he's not going to make it, because Luthen just will do whatever it takes, and will there can be no loose ends. So I did feel bad for Lonnie, because he's been Luthen's guy on the inside, and he's been, he may have had to do some bad things to maintain his cover, but he's kind of been doing, some necessary work to give intel to the rebellion through Luthen. And, it's interesting because it's like, because, as we've kind of talked about fascism, like the Empire will chew up any, you can serve it until you make a mistake, or until it no longer needs you anymore, and then it chews it up. And Luthen's, we like to think the rebellion is the antithesis of that, where, if you make a mistake, it's okay, or, you're not going to be arrested or killed. But, for Luthen, it's kind of like he's using the tools of his enemies, like he says in that one season 1 episode. So, yeah, it was sad to get Luthen, but I like that Lonnie's the one who conveyed kind of the original intel about the Death Star to Luthen, because, we can kind of see it as the chain of going from Lonnie to Luthen, and then eventually to to Saw's crew, to Jyn Erso, and then to the rebellion. So I like that we kind of got that beginning of that chain with this. So yeah, I mean, I'm pouring out for Lonnie because I liked him as a character too, but we really never got to meet his family, which is probably good because then we'd feel even worse for them. But yeah, I really liked that scene.
I thought it was interesting how they always say to watch the recaps because it's going to direct you where it's going to go. And they use that recap to show all the spy work and how the spy network is coming to a head. And, Luthen kind of losing control, I guess, a year before, even though for us it was a week. But you see him losing control, and Kleya is the one trying to maintain sanity, to maintain control. And when that alarm goes off, you can just see her face, like she knows. It's almost like she knows this is it. This is the big one. This is going to be huge. You could just see it in her face. Like they must have been trying to foreshadow that from direction standpoint. Because her face just looks completely shocked. And then I noticed a couple things that I thought were interesting when he goes and talks to Lonnie. Of course, when Lonnie mentions Kyber crystals, his eyes and his face just like, wait a minute, what? Kyber, what are you talking about? He doesn't say that, but his face physically changes.
It lights up, yeah.
Yeah. And then I noticed he was sitting on the bench they were sitting on was covered in like broken tile mosaic, as like everything's fallen apart or coming together, one of the two, not really sure which. Is sort of like a juxtaposition between the two. I just thought that was kind of interesting.
Right. You have, and I think what I really liked from this set was the portion at the very beginning where you have the two of them getting ready, Kleya and Luthen, and they have that short little conversations. And, she's sort of in this like protective mode where she's like, if it's not perfect, I want you to get out. And he says, I think we used up all the perfect. And you can see this sort of resignation in Luthen over the course of, this season that, and what he says to Andor in the last episode, which is we're going to hang for this, right? And he's kind of resigned to that fact. And Kleya's not, but you can see it sort of weighing on her. She is gone. She's always been very hard throughout the whole course of the show. And we see that, in her backstory throughout the course of this episode, kind of why she is the way she is. But she's also very morose in these last couple of episodes. You can see it in her face, this sort of like, it's a resignation the same as Luthen's, but it's different. It's a very sad resignation, whereas Luthen's is kind of an angry resignation, I guess. I think the conversation with Lonnie is very interesting from a spycraft perspective, because Lonnie is like, we need to get out and I have something I have to tell you. And, but it's all burned now. And Luthen's kind of like, what have you done? I love the shot they do after the conversation with Luthen kind of running down those stairs or up them, because it's shot at such a massive Dutch angle. And that's like, it's funny because then they show you that Lonnie's dead, but they could have just done that and like you would have known, because Dutch angles are usually used to show complete unhingement or madness, or that the character has done something wrong. And so like Luthen being shot that way, it was just a clear signal that, yeah, he's done something to Lonnie. I really also feel bad for Lonnie. It sucks that he died. I'm not surprised. I was a little surprised. I kind of thought Luthen would try and find a way to get him out, but I guess he's just at that end point. Like we were in this too long and now it's all got to burn. And that sort of goes into the conversation he has with Kleya, about who's going to do the burn. And you can see it on her face. She wants to do it because she thinks she can do it and get out and be okay. And he's like, no, it's already, because he knows what Lonnie said, which is that Dedra's got a team and they're going to make a play for him. And so that, that's sort of, this is the last things we get to say to each other. And it's all about, Gorman, Scarif, Kyber, Krennic, Urso, trying to get her to memorize those things. And she's, you can see it on her face when she walks away from that. She knows, like, that's probably it. Like there's,
and he tells her to move. Don't forget that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, and I think I want to go back to like season 1 and even season 2 at some point and see if there's throughout the series, if he tells her to move, because that's a callback that will come in the flashbacks that we'll talk about.
Yeah.
So, and I guess if we're moving in, or, I don't know if y'all have anything else I was going to say. A thought on the Dedra thing is, like, if I had a criticism of this, it would be, I would have liked to see her kind of putting the pieces together a little bit more to figure out that Luthen is Axis, just because I thought that was kind of like, I guess they kind of knew they had to do it in the show, so they had to kind of get to that point, and maybe didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I thought it seemed a little abrupt in how she found him, and I don't know if maybe she just,
well, it has been a year,
right,
so maybe a novel.
Yeah, exactly. Or, I just thought like a scene of her like reviewing security footage and seeing, wait a second, this guy was caught near Mon Mothma, and then puts it together. But
has there been an Axis novel yet? Because that would be a perfect title.
Yet. Hopefully,
yeah.
Hopefully soon.
Yeah, but no, you're right. We don't get to see her kind of put the pieces together. It's just she's figured it out, right? And that's. You kind of get the feeling like that's why Lonnie decides to make the move when he does, because he thinks Luthen's about to get nailed. And so he burns her credentials to dive in to find out. And I think he's going in to find out like what she knows and to see if she's actually going after him. But then he finds, the Death Star. And he's like, oh my gosh, this is so much more. And then we move into the confrontation scene. So what did you guys think about that?
I thought it was sort of like a cat and mouse. They were playing with each other. And I think both of them thought they were the cat. And to some extent, they were both the mouse. I think that Luthen had the upper hand the whole time. He knew that he had a way out because he kind of expected what she would do to him, knowing what she did to Bix back on Ferrix several years ago. She has the power to do stuff like that. So he had his way out. From a Catholic standpoint, is that right or wrong? It's war. So we can debate that. But he had his way out. So I think in that instance, he was the cat.
Yeah, I think Luthen knew how it was going to go. Like, he knew as soon as somebody shows up what he was going to do. And I also thought it was a little bit weird that he didn't just have the whole shop wired to blow, because that would have been the easier choice, but, less dramatic, I guess, because then you couldn't have the whole hospital scene. But yeah. I thought it was really interesting when she comes in, and because he's in the middle of trying to burn their communication equipment, and he only gets partway through, which is important for the next couple episodes. But she comes in, and he, their conversation was really interesting, because I think he says there's 2 pieces of questionable provenance in this gallery. Obviously talking about both of them. So yeah. I just thought that was really interesting. And then bringing back the Starpath unit, which is the thing that Andor stole in episode 1 that initially attracted Luthen's attention, and that's what attracted Dedra's attention, is that Starpath units were being grabbed. So I thought that was a really cool callback to the very beginning.
Yeah, there were 2 MacGuffins at the beginning of season 1, the sister and the Starpath unit. So that's why I was convinced I had a theory.
Yeah. And I love the 2 questionable pieces line, because I was thinking that Luthen was talking about him and Kleya. because they're the real fakes, right? They're not who they're pretending to be. I do also love the line where she asked, "Do you own all of these pieces?" And because that's what he calls his operatives, right? When they're in the field, he calls them pieces. And so his response that a few of them are on consignment, I thought that was really, I don't know, tongue in cheek, sort of like, not really like but it's funny because anymore he doesn't, right? His spy network is kind of all defected and gone to Yavin, although we still know that Willman is still, listening out and will still work for Luthen, at least on occasion, at least a year prior, right? And we still know that some of the other folks at least keep in contact, although Andor's out. So, and I absolutely love when she says, or the line he says, the rebellion isn't here anymore. It flew away. Because it's such it has the kind of dual meaning, both for him that, he is not the center of the rebellion anymore. And he hasn't been for a while now, right? With the move of Mon Mothma to Yavin, the rebellion is now solidly there, right? That's where its kind of center is now. It's with her. And prior to that, he could have claimed a real Axis position, right? Like I was the spy master running the show. But after that point, he's not. And so the last year has kind of been him sort of, I'm not going to say falling apart, but sort of coming down in the line of grace, I guess, in the halls of the rebellion. But at the same time, it also means, what we heard in the, in the manifesto, that the rebellion is everywhere, right? It's not just in one person. And I love that there's a whole galaxy waiting to disgust you. That line is so good. So then he opts for the dying on my own terms option. I honestly am not sure what the Catholic position on this one is.
Yeah, we need a moral theologian.
Yeah, if you're
calling Jimmy Aiken.
Right, yeah. I'll put this in the next time he asks for patron questions. We'll put this in the line. Yeah, if you're facing certain torture and possible death, is it okay? And I know there is a story about a saint who she's kind of, I think, being pushed, kind of walking the plank, but into fire, because they burned us.
Is that Agnes?
It might have been Agnes.
I could be wrong. I think it might be Agnes then.
I feel like Agnes was at the top, was in a building where they tried to steam her to death.
I don't know. Maybe
I could be wrong.
But I have heard that story.
Yeah, and she opts to just jump into the fire because she's like, I'm not gonna give you the satisfaction, kind of thing.
And Saint Ignatius, he says, I know where I'm going. Don't stop him.
Yeah. So I kind of feel like as a moral action, it's pretty gray, but I feel like it's the better option than being allowed to being taken into custody. But I don't know. I'd like to actually hear.
Yeah, I think it might also depend on if you're in the military and you're, if you're, a black ops military person or something, and you're captured and you have ways to terminate your life to avoid, giving up intelligence to the enemy. I think that's, I'm not, and I don't know for sure either, because I'm not a moral theologian, but I think that's at least that gets into at least a gray area. And of,
and how many people
protect others.
Yeah. So. How many people on Yavin and other places are in danger if he were to give it up,
right,
by torture? So is your culpability lessened? That's a big question.
Yeah. All right.
They don't have there's no Catholic Church in Star Wars, so in the universe at least. It doesn't necessarily apply.
Yeah. What does the Force think of it? That's the question.
Yeah. Yeah. That might make for a good episode. Yeah, I'll have to figure out figure that one out. So, but yeah, so at the end of the scene, Zhang's dead. Dedra's, got this mess of a situation where she's taken Luthen off to the hospital, and then we go into the halls of the ISB again. What did you guys think about this series of scenes?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting seeing Dedra kind of panicking because she's been, in season 1, she started off pretty calm and cool and collected, and then on Ferrix was kind of, when she was in the middle of the mob and stuff, like she was terrified and, lost control. And then in season 2, really up to this point, she's kind of been pretty much the calm, cool, and collected person. Even on Gorman, like she still made the decision that she thought was in favor of the Empire to, I don't care if Cyril dies, I got to do this. And then, but she's been obsessed with Axis, and we've had hints of it this season of her, trying to overstep because she was taken off the Axis desk to handle Gorman, but she still hadn't been trying to interfere with Axis with Hirt, who was put on that assignment. And here, she's kind of officially overstepped, or I don't know if she overstepped here to call the raid or exactly how that worked, but she is arrested at the end for kind of the mess that everything's been put in. And I don't know if she's arrested just for that, or if part of the arrest was because of what she learned from by getting the wrong, she got an email she shouldn't have and looked at and opened it. So I don't know if that was more that they were just kind of using this as an excuse, but yeah, I thought it was interesting that her, she's been kind of the servant of the Empire, and now is, like I said earlier, fascism will chew up and spit out, even the people who serve it when they no longer, when the machine no longer needs them, or when there's a mistake and they can be used, as an example or something. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting.
I thought it was clear that she did overstep here when she's, when he confronts her at the hospital, she's all tense, and she used to be his boss. He was her assistant in season 1, and now she's trying to make excuses for what she did, and she did it on his day off, knowing that he wouldn't be there she wanted that glory is what she wanted. She'd been, that was, Andor was Cyril's glory. That was the thing that he was trying to fight for and find. Axis was Dedra's. Gorman took her away from that, and it annoyed her. But I thought it was really interesting when they go to the ISB and Hirt's going to tell Partagaz about Jung, and that was the first time I'd ever seen any discomfort in Partagaz in 2 seasons. He's like, wait a minute, what? Oh no, because he knows about the Death Star, so you can only imagine he's thinking, what got out immediately? That's what he's thinking, is what got out. So the panic in that conference room, it was pretty palpable, I thought.
Yeah, Partagaz is probably one of my favorite characters. And it's not because I'm a manager in a large organization at all. No, wait, it is. It's sad because he's such a good manager, but he works for and I'm just like, oh, why are you evil? Why do you work for the bad guys? But yeah, when they come in and he's like, Dedra, and it's just like he gets hit twice. It's, Dedra's gone and taken this group and for this op, and she's basically gone rogue effectively. And then he gets hit with Jung's dead, and then he's like, what? And I've it's not been nearly as bad, but I've been in those situations where I get told, yeah, your supervisors did this and this and this, and I'm just like, what? Come on, guys. Why? And just the fallout from that. It's interesting watching the sort of kind of unraveling that happens within the ISB between Dedra, and because Jung's gone, and Dedra's former assistant who's now trying to make a name for himself. And it's funny, every time, he brings up the operative or the operation, he's like, this is totally Dedra's fault, but we're on the hook for it now. Kind of a thing, trying to constantly throw the shade on Dedra. I do wonder, like, so, and it's funny because we don't find out till the next episode what Partagaz actually knew or didn't know. But it is kind of crazy when you really do start thinking about it, like how much of a security operation this whole thing has been to try and keep the Death Star quiet, and how ridiculous it is. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to keep a project or something, like, on the down low, but like 10 years, like,
and really 19 years, because they were starting it, like they were probably already building it by the end of Revenge of the Sith.
Well, yeah, they have a scene of it. You have a structure with Palpatine and Vader and
Tarkin,
yeah, standing there looking at it.
And we see the plans in episode 2, which was a couple of years before that. So they were, I kind of think that particular scene was a little bit after it's already the end of the movie, like the events of the movie. But yeah, I mean, they've been
like an epilogue,
19 years. Yeah. And I mean, the second one's already been probably being built too at this point, because if it took 19 years to build, they probably have been building the second one for a while too.
Right.
Yep. So we leave the ISB in turmoil and we move over to, the Luthen Kleya storyline. And we get a little bit of the ISB sort of mixed in, but I think, that's sort of where we go, and we get Kleya trying to, figure out where Luthen is, and then, deciding, okay, she's got to end his life. And through the course of that, we get flashed in the background, and we get, I think the first scene, is sort of the title scene of the show, or this episode. It's Make It Stop. What did you guys think about that one?
I thought it was intense. You can see that he's dealing with, I don't know, would that be PTSD when you're in the middle of it? I mean, he's obviously had to deal with it for a while, I would think, to get him to that point, to get it, for him to be begging for everything to stop and all of that. And I think that made him make a decision that he wasn't going to fight like that anymore. That I don't know that he could be the one on the front lines. He can easily call the shots from the background. He can say, go do this, go do that. Here's how to do this. Here's how to do that. But to be the one to be on the front lines, I don't think that he can handle that anymore. It seems like he's been in it for a while, and he had hit a breaking point.
Yeah, I think the way I took it is that scene was during, probably the very beginning of the Empire, probably, maybe the end of the Clone Wars. So I kind of tend to think that he was already a soldier during the Clone Wars, and maybe served in some actions there that kind of, and he saw some pretty bad things in the Clone Wars. And if he's still in, the going from the Republic military to the Imperial military, he's probably being asked to do worse things than he did before, and it's just been building up for so long. So I think I've seen that they did some uniform comparisons to what he was wearing to other things we've seen. So I think this was like early Empire, and based on Kleya's age, it probably would make sense that it was like maybe right at the beginning of it or something. Because I always was curious, is he a Jedi like that escaped, or did he have a loved one who was a Jedi, and that's why that was killed in the in the Purge, and that's why he's so anti-Empire? But it seems like his anger is that he just was in the military and was made to do things that traumatized him, and that kind of shows how he now is using those similar tools when he's ordered some of these missions, and he killed Lonnie, did these things. So, but yeah, I thought it was really interesting that he was he was trying to drown out the voices through drinking when he was on the ship, and they were like, you got to turn your comms back on, because they're like, it seems like they're using flamethrowers to go and burn this town or whatever. So just horrible things that he's having to deal with, and he doesn't want to. Like, he's hiding in the ship trying to, avoid combat directly. And then, he sees Kleya, who snuck on, and, has a moment of compassion and hides her. And I'd be very curious to see kind of the story, that what happened between then and then when we next see them, when they're like, trading on whatever planet that was.
Yeah.
I thought that was a really interesting scene to finally get his, some of his backstory. But again, I do hope that we get, a whole 12 to 24 book series about Luthen and Axis and Kleya and all that.
Does anybody else think he stole that ship and left the rest of the soldiers there?
Yeah. At least I do.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that's how they got away.
Yeah. That's a guess. It's interesting because this sort of, and I'm not going to say it completely shatters, but it does kind of shatter the whole Jedi hypothesis that I think, I don't know about you guys, I kind of had that hypothesis that he was something to do with the Jedi, especially with the whole Kyber crystal thing that he gives to Andor in season 1. So it does kind of shatter that. He's just, a sergeant, amongst these troopers in what I'm going to guess is about 10 years before, or 10 BBY. Kleya is in her 20s, I'm thinking. That's a real rough guess from me. I'm usually bad at that kind of thing, but, her younger self seems to be about 10 in this scene, maybe a little younger. So I'm going to guess maybe 10, 15 years, right? And we have the Empire is only about 19 years old by the time of the Battle of Yavin. So, yeah, I would tend to agree. It's kind of early-ish Empire. And it's, I think Luthen not being a Jedi actually, I don't know. How do you guys feel about that? I don't know. What were y'all's theories about who we were, and how does that compare to what we actually got?
I just don't understand why he was so excited about kyber crystals all the time, if he's not.
Yeah.
So for what it's worth, I was looking it up. It says Kleya was rescued in 18 BBY, so about a year after the end of the Clone Wars, beginning of the Empire.
Okay.
Which could be interesting because there's a book, I've mentioned it before, but there's a book that's primarily about Mon Mothma and Saw Gerrera and Bail Organa in that time frame that came out a couple of months ago, called The Mask of Fear, and it's the first in a trilogy. So we could introduce Luthen in that series in the next couple, and they could do more books down the road. But yeah, I mean, I didn't think he was a Jedi even from season 1, but it was interesting that he had the Kyber. So I thought my theory had been that he had a loved one, either a sibling or something, who was a Jedi, that he, was taken at a young age to the temple, but then he learned, when the Clone Wars happened, he knows he lost a sibling, so I was kind of leaning toward that, or even like that he had an illicit relationship with a Jedi who was killed, and that just kind of completely turned him, or just generally the Empire killed someone that he loved, even if they weren't a Jedi. But the Kyber kind of made me think it was someone he loved was a Jedi. So, but yeah, it seems like he just had it from his various collecting and scavenging missions. And I'm curious to eventually hopefully get more on how he went from defecting soldier presumably to high-end art gallery owner. Because he, I don't know if maybe like he had that interest in archaeology and interest in artifacts before, but was drafted into the military and had to, serve in the military. But when we see the scenes of them like trading and stuff, it seems like he has a knowledge already of all that stuff. So yeah, I thought he was a family member or loved one was a Jedi, but it doesn't seem like that's the case. I mean, I guess it still could. We just haven't seen it yet. But
Yeah, it seems to stick with kind of Andor's separation from like the Jedi. I don't think we've seen a lightsaber. We've seen pretty much a single Force user over the course of the show, at least that we know about. And even she was kind of iffy on whether she could use the Force all the time or not. So I think it fits better, to be honest. I think him not being a Jedi or something of that nature, I kind of like that. I really like how this scene is shot. The first time, actually, even the second time watching, I'd forgotten. I forgot the whole scene is shot from Kleya's viewpoint. Like she's watching him. And the first little bit of the scene, you don't necessarily like key into that. And I guess it wouldn't be post-traumatic. It'd be like traumatic stress disorder, in the moment.
Traumatic.
Yeah. So we get this scene where, and everything in the scene is just over the radio, right? All these terrible things that are happening, and Luthen just yelling, "Make it stop," and then eventually finding Kleya. And then that moves us into their kind of wanderings. What did you guys think about, sort of this transition we get from, we get from Soldier, who is disgusted, right, with what the Empire is doing, right, in the same way Dedra is disgusted with the rebellion, to eventual, effectively terrorist.
I don't think you get to where you have the high-end art dealer and the skills that he has without Kleya. If those first scenes with her doing the wheeling and dealing, it's her doing it. He doesn't, he kind of makes the concession for that Deveronian necklace, because the Imperials are marching those kids down the steps. So he makes a concession because she's just wandering off. But I think had she stayed there and negotiated, they'd have gotten more than 80 out of that. She was the negotiator. She was the wheeler and dealer. And so I don't think that art gallery happens without Kleya. I don't think a lot of the spycraft, I don't think would happen without Kleya. I think they're a team. Yes, he did teach her some stuff at first, like when they have the bombing scene on what a lot of people think might be Naboo. But he's teaching her, how to handle something like that. But I think that rather than master and apprentice, I think it's more of, you show me this part, I'll show you that part, and we'll work together.
Yeah, I've kind of heard Luthen talked about as being like Batman, like he's living this double life, like this, wealthy socialite going to parties and whatever. But then in reality, he's, waging a war on his own. But it's almost like Kleya is almost more of the Batman, like traumatized at a young age and doing whatever, basically like Kleya is a cover for her identity. Like it's almost like Batman is her real identity and Kleya is just her cover. And we do see a little bit later in the last couple that kind of changes a little bit, but yeah, I think you're right. They're kind of I think it's, kind of like Luthen's the master, but he's learning a lot from her too. Cause she could probably get by on her own, but probably not like moving into the upper, crust of society, like she would like she kind of did with Luthen. So, I think you're right that they do kind of interplay a lot with each other and teach each other a lot,
right? Because we get the question she asks, "Am I your daughter now?" And it's sort of like this laden question, right? Because you don't know if she's asking, "Am I your daughter for this front we're putting up here, or am I your daughter? Like, are you like adopting me?" And his response is like basically whatever's useful. Like I'm Luthen and you're Kleya, and everything else is up for grabs. Basically, it's up for whatever we need. And then we get the conversation after the they and I like that conversation he has with the seller about what's going on. And the guy's like, yeah, a trooper ate a bullet, or he didn't say ate a blaster, which is, it's just a different take on that.
Yeah. He said he ate a bolt. Yeah.
Yeah. He ate a bolt. Which is another one of those phrases like we just use, just like hanging, right? Although they do that in Star Wars. So, but I love what he says is they keep finding people who did it, right? And they keep marching people out into the streets and killing. And it just goes back to that, that level of disinterested brutality that the Empire has towards its own people, right? Like, and we see this, on basically through all of this, it's on full display, and, with Luthen, as the sergeant, and we hear over the radio what they're doing to these effectively innocent people, as far as we can tell. And then this scene, and Kleya watches it, and then she just comes up to him and says, "What are we doing here? Like, what are we even doing?" And I love what he says. Like, I know Luthen's like grand speech in season 1 is so good, but I think if you take what he says in these 3 scenes and you kind of parse them together, I honestly think it's a little bit of a better speech. But he's like, we fight to win, and that means we lose and we lose and we lose until we're ready. And and we all know now, like, when we're ready means, Luke Skywalker blowing up the Death Star. But he doesn't know that. He that's 17 or 16 years or 18 years away at that point. And he explains to Kleya, all you know now is how much you hate. And you bank that and you hide it and you keep it alive until you know what to do with it. And when I tell you to move, you move. And it's such a different take on what to do with your emotions than we get from most of Star Wars, right? Like, it's a very, the Jedi is all about letting go of your feelings, right? Letting go of your emotions, letting them pass through you, that kind of thing. And the Sith are kind of hold on to it and use it in the moment. And this is bury it down deep, and we're going to let it loose when we need to, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's, if you've ever read like the Darth Bane books, which aren't canon, but I've been reading those recently. That's definitely like a Bane kind of a Sith thing of like, get angry, but hold on to it and bury it and use it, use it when, if it's years later, like use that well of anger to, unleash your power. But yeah, like in what we've seen in canon, it's usually like, don't hold on to your anger, just use it immediately. And, Palpatine's probably the best example of holding on to it. Every other Sith like Maul and Dooku and Vader are usually like, just use it immediately to, do whatever. So yeah, I mean, that kind of ties into them using the tools of my enemy. And that's, Palpatine is a Sith, and that's a tool of the Sith is using your anger. So I don't know if they were specifically tying that into like using, the Sith and the dark side there, but if they were, that's interesting. Yeah, I think you're right, Jason. That is on Naboo when because I think it's from the filming location they used, or I think it's some deleted scenes from episode 1 is what I've read, where they filmed Naboo, is like that convoy scene. And yeah. I think Tony Gilroy and like out of show stuff has kind of confirmed that it is actually Naboo where they blow up the convoy. Because it seemed like very similar architecture and very similar like people in kind of flowy, colorful robes and that kind of thing. So it's kind of a strike back against Palpatine on his home planet. Even though they don't know he's the average person doesn't know he's a Sith Lord and doesn't really care about his home planet. But if you don't know that, then striking, carrying out an attack on the Emperor's home planet is kind of a powerful statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. What did you guys think about the conversation between him and Kleya prior to the pushing of the button?
I think he's teaching her how to fight. She asks in that scene where he gives the speech on the, I don't know, kind of looks like the Great Wall of China. He's out there on that wall. But, he's telling her, like you mentioned, that she asks, when do we get to fight? And he says, we are. And so he's teaching her how to do it subtly, how to do it slowly, a little bit at a time, but also to make sure you're not giving yourself away. And I wrote this in my notes, and I've always thought this every time I watch a spy movie, and I've seen it throughout both seasons of Andor, of course, in Rogue One. Everybody that's a spy, they're always looking around all suspicious. Like, if I was looking for the spy, I would look for the one that's given the shifty side eye. And I mean, perfect example is Return of the Jedi, when they're in Jabba's palace and Lando pulls down his mask. I mean, I can understand from a movie making standpoint, they wanted to show Lando's there. Cool. That's neat. But in the second arc, when they're on Gorman, the kid that ends up shooting Cinta, when he's trying to be all spy-like, he's looking around all shifty. And if I were them, I'd say, why are you looking around like that? Of course, looking around all shifty ended Andor up in Narkina 5. So don't look all shifty when you're trying to blend in.
Yeah. And that just to go back to that scene too. Yeah, that was a really interesting conversation. So I did like that he's kind of teaching her, like, don't be, because I mean, when we see them interacting with like the public, in the shop or at the parties and stuff, they're usually not, they're usually like playing the part, like Kleya. Like when they're at the party in the second set of episodes this season, when she's talking to Lonnie, she's like pretending to flirt with him, because that's what everybody there is doing. And that kind of continues when she pulls him, because she's doing that to get him to help her take out the listening device. And Luthen's putting on his show, so I mean, they're very good at that. Not really looking shifty for the most part. But yeah, like you said, it's like people start, when you look nervous, that's kind of a clue and can draw attention. So I like that they, like you said, that they learn not to draw attention to themselves that way.
Yeah, I liked the conversation itself. It was very much like Luthen trying to give her an out, and her seeing through that. At the same time, like, kind of like, what are you doing? Like, let's just do this and move on. But I think he really was trying to get across to her, like, this, like, it's always going to be like this. Like, we're never going to be like these other people around here and be able to do these things. And I need to know you're doing it not just because, I saved you 10 years ago or 5 years ago, or, however old she is at that point, 3 years ago. And because he says, I'm afraid of what I'm doing to you. I'm afraid of kind of what I'm turning you into. And that he lived most of his life not knowing that choice was a possibility, which is an interesting callback to the conversation he has with Dedra, where Dedra accuses him of, he doesn't want freedom. All he wants is freedom for himself and slavery for the rest of the galaxy. And, because
that's what she's fighting for.
Yeah, she still is like holding on to this myth of imperial peace, right? She comes in, it's like, you were hiding under this imperial peace this whole time, using the emperor's peace effectively, I guess, to call up Foundation. I don't know how I pulled that, but and
just respect and enjoy the peace.
That's right. Yeah. But she's had her own, Dedra had her own breakdown the 2 episodes before, after the Gorman incident, in the room, the Situation Room post massacre. She's sort of has that full blown breakdown where she's trying to rip her collar off and like, oh God, what have I done? You don't know if that's about Cyril or if that's about what's happened or if that's what that's about exactly, because they don't explain it. But it's an interesting insight, I think, into Luthen and Kleya's motivations, because Kleya there's no I mean, it seems like there's a little bit of consideration on her part that, maybe there is a different life or a different option, but not really. Like she just once the detonator's on the table, she reaches for it. And then he says, nah, I'm still going to do it.
Yeah. Even, in his limited way, he's keeping her from killing people, because I don't think we've really seen her throughout the show really, like, she's not the one who's, pulled the trigger or pushed the button or anything. It's all, it's all, been Luthen or other people that Luthen's directed. She's kind of just the intermediary, and there is culpability there, if we're talking Catholic moral standpoint, because she's still involved in these actions, but she's not the one, pushing the button or pulling the trigger. So, which I thought was, it's interesting that in his, like, people in this show, a lot of people don't know how to be have real healthy relationships, and so they're doing, to a greater or lesser extent, they're doing the best they can. And I think Luthen in that way is like, doing the best he can to protect her. Even though she's still going to be involved, but I don't know. I thought that was interesting too.
Yeah, because you get sort of the display of Luthen and Kleya's dysfunctional relationship, but you only you sort of get it over the course of the series, but you get sort of the background here, which is, yeah, you're right. Nobody has a real, like, the closest you get is Andor and Bix, and even that's not a non-dysfunctional relationship. So besides, set to the background of all of this background, is Kleya infiltrating the hospital. What did you guys think about the infiltration and mission?
She did what she had to do. We go back to that moral gray area. Is that euthanasia or is it war? But that she knows that so many people are in danger if she doesn't do that. But she's pretty much an expert at it at this point. The way she gets through the hospital and has her revolver blaster. Did you guys notice that? It looked just like a revolver. It was really cool. But she knows what she needs to do, and she's an expert at getting in there. And it was interesting how they had all the little things that she's dealing with as a microcosm of how she was raised, how she found Luthen, how she was trained. They were using, when they're doing the flashback for the bombing, she's getting ready to bomb those ships as a distraction, all those different things. And then, of course, when she has to remove the life support, at that point, I think that's the first time I saw him as a father figure to her, as opposed to equals. But that was a father-daughter moment from my point of view, anyway.
Yeah, and I was saying, I was saying earlier she never pulled the trigger, but then she does pull the trigger on a couple of times in this infiltration, and
a bunch of times.
So, I thought it was. And one thing I want to point out before I forget is the hospital is named Lena So Hospital. If you translate the Star Wars character, like the alphabet, which is the Chancellor during the High Republic books that just ended. So I just thought that was a cool touch point and callback to that. But yeah, I really like her infiltration and trying to, like, because Dedra and the ISB have locked down the hospital, and are locking down the level that Luthen's on, because they need him alive, and he can't die because he's got the information they need. He's the only source of information they have on finding more intel on the rebellion. So, and I liked Kleya's infiltration, and she's such a good actress. Like, as a character, Kleya is a good actress, because she's changing from art dealer to nurse and sweet, like, oh, I'll take you down here, because she's got the little old lady alien that she's pushing to saying, well, we'll check in with your family down here or whatever. So
That grandma seems so happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've said it before, but the actress Elizabeth Dulau, I think is her name. Like, this was Kleya was her first major role, so she's been one of the breakout characters for me, and just has been really, really well played and really well done this entire series. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed, this whole sequence of getting through the hospital, and while the ISB is like also, kind of, it's like the cat and mouse game. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I love the fact that she gets to use her bandages from how she hurt her hand trying to get the listening device out of the artifact again as a disguise to get in as a.
I didn't even catch that's the same bandage.
Yeah, she's covered.
That was like 2 years ago now.
Yeah,
oh, was it? So, yeah, I guess. Yeah, I always forget about that.
Yeah, I thought it was just she wrapped up her hand and found something to make it look like blood or something.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm headcanoning it's the same bandage.
It never healed. She needed the force.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, I thought it was really well done. I thought the interplay between it and the background information or the flashbacks and how they interwove it together, with the similar kind of stuff going on. And you kind of get Luthen's final moments from a breathing perspective, and he dies. He looks very peaceful in his death, kind of like, I'm done. Like I'm finally done. Like it's over. I've done my part. The Empire's going to pay for what it's done to all those people, kind of a thing. And she sheds a couple tears, and then she goes, right? She moves. There's no like lingering there or staying there to get caught or captured or anything. She does it, and then she goes. And then we kind of get just a fade to black. So is there anything else about this episode that we haven't talked about you guys want to bring up?
I think I got all my points out. Oh, nope, I didn't. I honestly was convinced, even after those episodes, and they didn't mention anything about it, I was convinced that Kleya was the Andor's sister. And I wasn't the only one that thought that. There's lots of internet speculation, so much so that Tony Gilroy had to put out statements. And I'm pretty sure Jeff was the one that showed me that on Discord, that no, she is not the sister. But that's one of the things that had me on the edge of my seat was, the fact that she was all dirty and hair matted and everything. I thought that they were on, oh my gosh, what's the name of that planet that Cassian's from? Oh, I put you guys on the spot, didn't I?
Well, have our Discord people figure it out.
That one where Cassian's from. I thought that maybe that's where they were fighting that war, and that she was, that was a couple years after Cassian was taken by the Andors. And I thought that was going to come out that she was his sister, and it would have been one of those things that she would have known, but he didn't. And she was keeping it a secret from him. But that's how my theory went, but I was wrong.
Yeah, I guess I never thought it was his sister. I think when the season started, I think it was kind of clear to me that they were dropping the sister storyline just because it came up in the very beginning of season 1 and then didn't really come up again. So I kind of thought that, okay, they're just kind of dropping it. They're moving on. So, but yeah, I don't think I had anything else. I think we covered it.
Yeah, and I think, I always like to talk about the music, but this music just fit, right? It wasn't anything in particular. You had a very hard sort of techno intro with drums setting you up for hard action. Like big stuff was going to happen. And then you have the sad instrumental music kind of mixed with a synthesizer. I will say what was different was the music for the entirety of the outro. Most of the times the outro is broken up into two separate musical pieces that they do a pretty good job of sort of weaving them together. And if you let the player just click over to the next episode, you won't ever hear the second piece. This didn't have one. It was just a at least as far as I could tell, it might have been, but it was just a continuation of the same sort of instrumental music that we got. So it's sort of the requiem for Luthen. And that's it for this episode of The Secrets of Star Wars. We'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons, including Dan F., Nancy A., James C., Diano S., and Renee N. Their generous donations help us to create The Secrets of Star Wars and all the shows here at StarQuest. And you can join them at sqpn.com/give. And now we'd like to hear from you, our listeners. What did you think about this episode of Andor? You can let us know by sending us an email at starwars@sqpn.com, on our social media pages, or by leaving a comment on our wonderful and awesome StarQuest Discord server, which you can find at sqpn.com/discord. And until next time, thank you, Jeff, for joining me.
It's Scott.
And thank you, Jason, for returning to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
You're very welcome. And once again, I'm Patrick Mason. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Wars on StarQuest.
Here's another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy. Let's Science. Find the show wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/science.